use this talk as a bit of a plea, just on the off chance that there might possibly be some future funding in this area, and there might be somebody in here that's thinking about commissioning work. And I guess my plea is that there are some absolutely fascinating research channels out there that are completely commensurate with producing research that will actually make a difference and change things. And therefore I would really be keen to see those challenges being addressed and the research actually resulting in real world change. And this is a really good time to undertake such research, because we've got the policy mechanism pretty much in place now to do this. You'll probably be quite familiar with the 25-year environment plan, which is based on the natural capital approach, a fusion of natural, physical and social science brought together to improve decision making. What might not be quite so familiar, but actually in a way is more important, is the fact that this very boring looking document was issued last year. These are the guidelines produced by the Treasury for assessing all public spending. And what you will see is that natural capital is all over it. So the last time this was issued was 15 years ago. That's how long these things last for, and that's what it says now. It says natural capital stocks have got to be thought about. You need to think about cumulative effects across projects, and you need to think that projects generate multiple impacts, not just one. If you've got a policy to do with producing wheat, it will not just affect wheat. It will affect lots of other things as well, and those need to be measured and valued. So what is this natural capital approach? I'm sure some of you will be familiar with it, but just to bring everybody to the same level of familiarity. So it's the idea that we have two basic resources. We have the sun, and we have the Earth's physical resources, and together these combine to produce nature's capital, nature's stock of potential services for humanity. These services, often called ecosystem services, of themselves often are not the sources of value, but when you combine them with other types of capital, like people, then you produce just about everything that society and human well-being is based upon. Something just to note here, we've spent about the last 100 and something years substituting from this capital to this capital, to the extent that the capital here in some cases is beginning to run out. But a really good example would be, you could think about a big fish stock, a big population as one type of natural capital stock. Produces a flow every year of new fish. That would be your ecosystem service, and there's a limit to how much you can run down that stock before this collapses. Okay, it was very interesting this morning. I see that after just 3 years, it looks of reopening fishing properly in the North Sea, looks like it's on the edge of collapse again. So, lots of different goods, all depending upon the natural environment, all coming in a huge array of natural units. And in fact, this doesn't really portray just how many units we're talking about. So I did this review for the Rockefeller Foundation recently, and as you'll see, there's rather a lot of units. Now, I don't believe that, well, I definitely can't. I can't trade off those units. Maybe there's some geniuses in here that can, but I think that most people, and definitely most decision makers that I've met, faced with that would try not to compare tons with milligrams and all that sort of stuff, but to try and work out how important these different things are. And there's many units of importance, but the one that is used the most in the Green Book and in actual real decision making is to try and put this into money values. Not all things can be monetised, certainly not in my opinion, but most of them can. Those that can reliably should be. Those that can't must be respected, and there are a lot of good ways to make sure that they are not run down. Quantity limits is a really good one. No loss limits, for example. Okay, lots of good ways to value these things. Not going to talk about those though. Instead I'm going to say once we've got these various measures, we can obviously begin our appraisal. We can also bring in assessments of whether the stocks are sustainable or not, and we can feed that in to the decision making. The decision making is not the same as the appraisal, but nevertheless appraisal feeds into that. And there's then an implementation phase, which is actually very important. I'll come back to that, and the whole thing kicks off again. So that's really what the natural capital approach is. In a way, it's looking at the supply of resources and the demand of resources coming together. Can we use this then to make better land use decisions? Yes, we absolutely can, but the first thing that we have to realise is that land use, particularly in a country like the UK, but almost in all countries now, is not random and it's not natural. And it is the product of many different forces, which I've just sort of grouped together into four general categories there. And those are the drivers of change. And attempting to understand land and changes in land by just looking at one of these, let's put, that's my original field, economics. If I was to just look at that and say, oh yeah, I can understand that, there's no way. Absolutely no way, because there are other factors in here. And so, for example, should you think that you can understand land use and drivers thereof by just looking at the environment, you'll get it wrong. So you've got to look at all these different factors. One thing that's really lucky in this country is we have amazing data. And we've been collecting it for a really, really long time. You know, we've now got fantastic Earth observation data sets, but we've also got lots of other data as well. We mustn't forget that, because there is no satellite in the world or in space that can tell you, be a better place for it, how much money is being made from this operation in this location. You need the two types of data. You need a theoretical model. You can't just do straight statistics, you know, what is the situation here, let's try and analyse that, because that won't be enough to allow you to say what's going to happen if things change. So you've got to have some sort of theoretical basis underneath this. So only a multidisciplinary approach will allow you to undertake research which is suitable to then be a basis for making better decisions. We've got to get multidisciplinary about this. You've got to look at the reality of the world. You've got to incorporate things like spatial and temporal dependence. You've got to think about uncertainty. You've got to think about feedbacks. There isn't any way around those things. You've got to do it. And also something I'm particularly keen on, we've got to test things. We've got to actually produce testable hypotheses, proper Popperian hypotheses that can be falsified, and actually conduct those tests, recognising all those things above, like uncertainty, as part of those tests. Only when you've done that will you have the sort of basis for saying, well, what happens if something changes? What happens if I change a policy? What happens if the price of timber changes? What happens if the climate changes? If you do that, now I think you've got the basis of an understanding of what might happen. This is one that was done recently. This is a big interdisciplinary thing that we did with lots of other universities as well, to actually show how, for example, a warming and in the growing season drying UK will actually switch its land use, irrespective of what we do in other areas. Next thing is, okay, you've got these drivers producing changes in land use. We have to think about all the outcomes that these will generate. And there are many, many types of them. You know, as this changes, as it gets warmer, you're going to get more cereals, you're going to use more fertilizers. That's going to affect the ecology of the land and waterways. And it's also going to affect the things that often people care about, the values associated with this. And I've already mentioned there's going to be spatial effects here, there's going to be feedbacks. So you need to consider all of the major consequences of land use change, including those that occur outside markets. Why am I focused on markets? Well, because often these are the things that are actually determining the changes. And Mark just said it right at the end. We can work out, you know, what's best, but actually decisions are being made quite reasonably. This is not a revolutionary chant here, but they're being made by people who are more concerned about certain types of values than others. But from a social planner perspective, from a policy perspective, we need to think about everything. Because it's only by thinking about all of these that we actually try and get a good picture of social values. Okay, so we've got this wonderful dynamic system. Just a 1 minute plea for us not to just think about land, think about the things that land affects. So, land, you know, what's happening over here has massive effects on what's happening here. And one of the things I'd like to flag up that is important is because one of the big things that are happening over here is production of food. Well, actually, increasingly, over here is producing food as well. We have now passed the point where the world is now consuming more from aquaculture than from wild capture fisheries. And that difference is only going to increase. And you're looking at a source of food which actually takes up an awful lot less area than land-based production and produces amazing levels of protein and nutrients, and arguably some of it, especially say shellfish aquaculture, has very attractive externality characteristics. So there aren't so many negatives as some other food sources. Okay. This all sounds very complicated. We have to move it into the realm of real decision making. We have to produce tools which will help decision makers make better decisions. And I think we really are seeing this happen in a number of initiatives. One that, of course, I'm going to stress is the stuff we're doing, and particularly Brett Day is here and he's leading this project. Some of you might have heard of NEV, Natural Environment Valuation, or its online version, NEVO, which tries to bring together all of the issues that I've mentioned to date within a pretty easy to use online system. So here it's telling you things about, well, there's lots of different areas that you can look at, but say here we're looking at the agriculture one. It will tell you about the areas of production here, but it also tells you about the things that actually drive decisions, the amounts of money that are coming off these different systems, how that's going to change into the future under a variety of scenarios. For example, climate change at different levels, but also what's happening as a result of that in terms of, say, water quality. So what's happening to the nutrients, pesticides, that sort of stuff. That's for this little set of options here, but we can look at recreation, we can look at greenhouse gases, water, biodiversity, and so on. Using this system, we can actually do the sort of analysis that Mark already alerted us to. So the idea of answering questions like, where should we plant Britain's new forests? And this is one that we did for the three governments here. They told us a few years ago that they were all going to plant 250,000 hectares of trees, which I'm sure Mark is laughing his head off to actually hear. We didn't believe it either, but they asked us the question, so we answered it, and we said, well, actually, their answer, it depends how you're going to implement this. If you just do what you've done in the past and you put some subsidies and just throw them out there, then this is probably what you're going to see. You're going to see it being diverted into areas where the other uses of land are really low value. You're going to get a lot of planting in remote areas, so you're not going to get any recreation out of this. You're going to get a lot of planting on peatlands, So, you know, expect this to actually increase global warming rather than reduce it. And actually, when you apply Green Book rules to this, you actually find that such a wonderful subsidy system as this is actually going to make UK PLC worse off. If instead you use a natural capital approach and you actually target on all the different criteria that you've got here, then you actually find a very different pattern of planting and very different values. Just to sort of finish off, implementation matters. How you decide to go from working out this is a good idea to go ahead with to what actually happens on the ground. This is something that Mark's talk I thought flagged up really well. This isn't a Stalinist state. We can't say you have to plant here. You have to instead actually make it attractive to landowners to engage with this. And how you decide to do this will change the result. This is something that I was told to take out about 15 minutes ago, and it's work that we're doing for DEFRA on the new version of the CAP. So, it's going to happen. There will be a new CAP. It's exciting, isn't it? And there's going to be a huge amount of money up for grabs. You know, that's the sort of level of money that we're talking about. You have to think about where's the best place to put it, but also how are you going to implement this, because this will change things. And if you're looking for research challenges, that's a really difficult research challenge. Don't pretend that you don't need advanced maths and stats to do that, because you definitely do. Okay, just to summarise, I'm really keen that whatever research comes out of this, yes, it's frontier research, but please let's make it frontier research which actually affects change as well. And the only way we're going to do that is to work multidisciplinary. One discipline, even a wonderful discipline like economics, actually cannot give you the correct answer to this. Think about the complexities. Think about things like spatial and temporal dependence. Think about uncertainty and feedbacks. Plea for testing. Proper testing in ways that people demonstrably can see and believe. If we do this, I really think there is a huge prize here to be won. We can actually really alter not only the research frontier, but what is happening in the country. Think about all the consequences of the change that we could effect. Not just the market stuff, which hits the headlines, but all the others. We have some real big, heavy-duty challenges to address. Think about alternatives. Don't just say, oh, sorry, Mark, but don't just think we're going to plant some forests. We could do other stuff as well. Forests are, of course, absolutely fantastic, but think about other uses of the land as well. You'll probably in the end say plant forests, but think about it. And think about the people that we're actually trying to influence. I've been very lucky, and I think it is mainly luck, to advise DEFRA for a long time. And your average academic paper, particularly one with lines and lines of equations, there's nothing they can do with it, I'm afraid. You've got to actually do the hard work with them, but also for them, and actually produce the tools which are compatible with existing decision-making approaches. Because if you're going to start a conversation with decision makers by saying everything that you do is wrong, and you've got to do something in a totally different way, it's going to be a pretty short meeting. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's brilliant. And we're actually almost back on time as coffee aficionados will just be cheering about. So we've got time for a few questions for Ian. Mark?
Thanks, Ian. The afforestation modelling you did, you were advocating the natural capital approach. But the natural capital you were considering was all based within the UK.
Oh, yes.
Growing trees on agricultural land and reducing food production, then you're probably going to displace that food production elsewhere, which could lead to deforestation in other parts of the world. So do you not consider the displacement effects as part of your modelling strategy?
Well, first of all, I want to challenge your assertion. When we started the CAP, it sucked in massive amounts of agricultural land. We have a lot of agricultural land in the country which wouldn't necessarily be under agriculture if we changed the system. If we changed it so that I'm a big advocate of making sure that we keep farming communities going in this country. I don't think that the farming community should pay for what we've done to them over the last 45 years. But I do think that we should actually change the target of those subsidies so that we actually get things that we want rather than excesses of things that we don't want. And so actually switching subsidies so that we are moving to a public money for public goods approach rather than what we have at the moment, which is public money for the ownership of land, which is pretty difficult to defend in my opinion. I can get, I'm very lucky where I am. I've got a couple of fields. I can get paid for them. I've never registered for it, but that's just not right, really. So I actually think there's a lot of excess land in it. Nevertheless, suppose that we actually went down this to the extent that we actually change the amount that we import and export. There's no problem with extending the analysis to look at that. So we've already begun to look at things where we do very, very simple things. What if we actually just look at the overall imports and exports and look at the environmental characteristics of imports coming into this country rather than the stuff that we produce domestically? So you can do it.
One more question. Alessandro? Yeah.
So I was interested in your use of the optimization, which you partly clarified in the end, saying, well, if you go there and say that you have all the answers, then it's going to be a short meeting.
Yeah.
So because there might be a danger, I would like a clarification, a danger that, mathematically minded people might think that what we need is to do is kind of maximize or minimize some function, and that would be the answer provided by a wonderful tool. So
yeah.
I would like to see your perspective on whether optimization exists and what is it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in principle, this is not an impossible question. It's a very difficult question. I fully agree. But there's not an element in here that says you cannot do this. You need some really advanced maths, and thank God we've got people like Peter that can sort all that out. And the other, it's obviously a Peter thing, obviously, here. So there's more intelligent people than me that can work the difficult side of that out. So it's not like there is no solution to this. I think going to people like the Treasury and saying things like, well, if you do this via flat rate subsidies, you get a different answer than if you do it. So at the moment, there's a big vogue for auctions. At the moment, big vogue inside DEFRA anyway, for auctions. You will get a different answer. Treasury's totally on board with that. Of course you do. Absolutely. You end up with different incentives for different people. You'll get a different uptake. So that comes back to my original thesis for giving this talk. We don't have to go and find some weird question which is of only academic interest. There are plenty of really good research questions that we can address which also directly help support better decision making. I'm very keen that whatever comes after that addresses that.
I'm afraid we'd better leave it there.
Okay.
But I think Ian will be here during the coffee break still.
I've got to go at 2. The reason why I'm dressed like this is of course because I'm talking here, and nothing to do with the fact I've got to have dinner with the VC in London at a fundraising event. So I've got a taxi at 2:30. 3:30, and in that time. So I'm going to have to go there, which is not what I want to do. I can assure you.
In that case, we'll take 2 more questions.
Oh, all right. Thanks. Cheers.
Hi, Jim Harris, Cranfield.
Oh, yeah.
You said something interesting there about us working within. Well, not interesting.
Thank
about
you.
working within a given set of political arrangements, have you given thought to sort of alternatives like compulsory purchase and modelling that? What if you said, well, actually, this is a power the government uses for investing in built infrastructure? Why wouldn't you say part of what we're going to do is invest in natural capital, and that means we will be dictating to landowners what's going to happen on these?
Well, in principle, I like what you're saying. I can think of many people that I work with in government that definitely wouldn't. Absolutely not. But it gives me a chance to talk about something else that's related, which I'm really, really keen on. And we've already heard from the fantastic talk from the Manchester Pioneer about the issue of net biodiversity gain. There is a big push actually to extend that to net environmental gain, which actually, in my view, makes more sense. The environment's the system. Why would you try and just look at one element of it when you know it's linked to everything else, and there's nothing you can do about that? You can't pretend it's not. It definitely will be. So net environmental gain, I think, is the way to go. But there's some real differences of opinion about how you should do this, and I should say I'm talking now as an individual, not as a member of anything else at all. There is a lot of pressure to say if you're building something, then you should compensate in that area. It kind of sounds good. I think it's a really bad idea. A really, really bad idea, because the chances of you slapping a little wood next to this massive housing estate that's just being built, and that actually being good for wild species, is pretty non-existent, I'd say. And it's certainly no way as optimal as actually thinking about something that was mentioned by somebody, the idea of corridors, and making the islands that are needed for species to be able to hop between what we have at the moment, which is a fragmented set of non-networked ecological areas. Another alternative to that, which I think is worth considering, even if you say, right, I want this for humans, then why should we be compensating the people which, by economic definition, must be better off because they've just decided of their own free will to move to these executive homes and that sort of stuff? Why are we compensating them with a wonderful woodland next to them, when the sort of area that I was brought up in, the centre of Birmingham, Handsworth, nobody's ever going to build there, because you're not going to be able to sell the places, for one thing, so we're never going to get any compensation there. You know, Scunthorpe, Grimsby, these sort of towns, those are the places where this sort of compensation should be going ahead. Soapbox stuff there. That is my comment. That is not the universal view of some other people.
So Tom had his hand up earlier. I think there's other hands up. My apologies, I've missed more people. I know Tom, just one last question.
Thanks, Ian. I just wanted to get your views on the importance of transparency in these models for land use decision making. So on the one hand, obviously lots of billions of pounds of public money being spent on these models which inform decisions, and there's an argument they should be open to scrutiny, and also the science in those models might be improved by making them openly available. On the other hand, you've got the question of kind of intellectual property and consultancies maybe making their bread and butter out of these models. And how do you navigate that space and have models which are kind of proven to be fit for purpose?
Everything that we do, now Brett is just in front of you, we make open access. Everything is there, and it should be, because our research is funded by public money, NERC in particular being fantastic. It should all be made free, and that's the only solution to that, really. And I think that's an extremely transparent way to do it. It's very much open to scrutiny. You can go through it line by line. God help you, you're going to enjoy it, but it's all there if you want to. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andrew.